Hello and welcome to your tutorial on creating value scales in a few different types of drawing materials. First, I want to set mine up. You can do this with squares using a ruler or freehand. I'm going to use some circles today just to show you something a little bit different. And I have this handy circle tracer. I'm going to focus on the 1.5 inch. You can go a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger, but this is a small enough sample size that it's a little easier to mix in. It's also a big enough space that you can really truly see what is going on. So since I'm going to be working with 3 different materials here today, making 4 step value scales, I'm going to trace the circle 4 times in a row. If you're drawing this by hand, you'll just draw them about the size of a golf ball. And I'm going to need to make a couple of different rows here because I'm going to show you today chalk pastels, colored pencils, and oil pastels. You can also trace yours in a pencil. I'm just doing mine in Sharpie, which is fine as well. It does make it nice and easy to see where your circle is at. And you can put your circles a little closer together, a little far apart. See, I kind of accidentally did that. But this is just a little skill builder here. So let's begin. And I'm going to label this one up here. We'll do chalk pastels first. Now, I'm ready to choose a hue from my pack here. I've got my chalk pastels off to the side. Just a simple little 12 pack. And I'm going to work with this green. So chalk pastels can be fairly simple because I can put a little bit down and then I can blend it or push that around. But one thing that does do is you notice how you're seeing that mark that I had in there first. I can also go over with some white to help blend it. And that's going to give me a little bit more of a solid, softer filled area. So now I can go on to my next one. And again, I'm going to just lightly fill in. Notice that I started off with a little bit more this time. And that gave me one that was fairly comparable to that one. I'm not going to add white to this one this time, but I am going to go over it one more time, very lightly, just to fill that space. And then I start to see that's a nice stair step down there. So I'm going to keep working in this way as I continue through. Notice I'm pressing a little bit harder, getting a little bit more of that chalk pastel down. And I can go over it again. It's better to have to go over it again than to have a ton of the chalk residue to try and get rid of. Now, as I'm looking at that, that's a nice step down from this one. This one I want to get pretty dark with, so I'm going to go ahead and press down just like I did before. This time I'm going to lightly go over it with some black to blend in together. You can also use a blending stump. I just prefer to use my finger. So now we have 4 different steps within that chalk pastel. What we're ready to do next is I'm going to clean off my finger. Use a paper towel and kind of wipe that off so I'm not making finger smudges. If you need to wash your hands in between these, that's okay. You are welcome to do that. So let's go next to our oil pastels. Okay, and I've got my pastels all switched out. Now, one of the benefits of this being a 25 pack is you may find that you have some different hues. So you could use a pink. You can just go ahead and start with that if you were working with red, and then do your red, and maybe even see what the difference is when you're blending with white and maybe even with black. So the thing to remember about an oil pastel is that a lighter color will blend over a darker color. A darker color will simply mark over top of a lighter color. So if I wanted to, maybe just for consistency's sake, I'm going to stay with the same hue just so you can compare. I'm going to start with my green. And I'm going to lay this green down. And then I can go over it with the white. And see how nicely that blends to make that lighter green. Now I'm ready to come down a step. So maybe I'll try laying a little bit more green down. And we'll see how this does. Not as much white. There's already more green down there, so it's just going to kind of smooth out what I've got there. And it's a little bit, still a little bit light. So what I may want to do, let's try going back over it with a little bit of green. Nice solid coat. There we go, and that just brought it down just a touch. So this one I can probably just do a nice solid color green, and we'll see what that looks like. There's a tiny bit of difference, but if I want to darken this, this is where I can take perhaps a darker green from my pack. Bring that in just lightly. That's better. And then if I need to, just to blend it again with the lighter color to smooth it out, I can go back over it one more time with my green. Now that's much more comparable to that one and light darker than that one. And then let's see what happens if I just take this darker green. And I'm going to lay this one down first for my darkest. And that is definitely darker, but I want to blend it so it's a little bit smoother. So I am going to go over that green with my lighter green, just to smooth it out. And it still stays nice and dark, you'll see, nice, a little bit of a change from there. I can also go in with black, or I can go back in with my darker green as well, with one more thin layer to really make that go down where it needs to be. And now we are ready for colored pencils. Okay, so and here again I am going to stick to the same hue just to compare the different hues within the different ones. If you're doing your own, feel free to go ahead and mix up the hues. It's more about working with the materials. So the same principles apply with all of these materials, no matter what hue you are using. But I'm just showing you the different greens just to stay consistent. So here again, we can find that there are perhaps some light greens. You may have a darker green. So you can use those to your advantage. You can also use white as a little bit of a blender. Although most of what you will do with the colored pencils is going to be possibly with some burnishing. So if I want to take this light green and I want to color it in, they're fairly easy to get nice and solid. But if I wanted to smooth that out just a little bit, remember you can burnish it with an eraser by just lightly going back and forth over top of it. And that'll just help to kind of smooth that out and get rid of some of your pencil marks. So here in this next one, let's see what happens if I take my other green here. That's a little bit darker than I want. So I can correct this by maybe going back in with my middle green in there and going over top. Notice how light I put that first layer. The trick with colored pencils is the hardest that you push, the harder you push, the harder it is to lay another color on top of it. So that may even be a little bit too dark still. That looks more like it should be that one. So let's see if we can bring this up just a notch here. It's not going to do real great. We can try some white. And what that's doing is just kind of blending it. And I guess that's a little bit better. So that's kind of as good as that one's going to get because that first dark was so dark. So here in this one, I really liked that how that green turned out. So I'm going to just repeat my steps. With the darker green, and then this green, so that I can get this one in there. Okay, and for this last one here again, I can take my darker green, fill in this space. Sorry, I'm shaking everything. And if I do this nice, and I'm pressing down, notice as I'm pressing down harder and filling it in more, it's getting darker. This one will probably be good for my darkest one. If I wanted to, I could even take a little bit of black over that to take it down one more notch. But there you have it. 4 different values in 3 different materials. This last one was colored pencils. I forgot to label. There we go. Colored pencils.